Stablecoins on Lightning is huge. I think a lot of Bitcoiners are not paying close attention to that, but it's going to be massive. Just for some context, Tether did $7 trillion in transactions this past year. That's more than Visa. So stablecoins clearly have product market fit, and the blockchains that they've been using are not secure. I mean, they're too small to be secure, and they're at one phone call risk where they
Yeah.
could be shut down. They're too centralized, where we need a fully decentralized system in order to make stablecoins work. And so that should happen on Bitcoin.
Jesse, we're going to test your patience today and see how well you can communicate to a very non-technical person, something that seems very technical to me. So I'm here for it. We'll see how you do. You'll be able to teach a kindergarten class after this. But give people a little bit of history about your company. It's Amboss or Amboss?
Amboss.
Amboss.
Yeah.
Okay, so give us a little history of how you came into the Bitcoin space, and then what your guys' company is doing, and then we'll talk about the Lightning Network and what's really happening behind the scenes and what kind of services you guys provide.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'll try and keep it as simple and straightforward as possible. Because it's something that matters a lot to me. But as far as how I got into Bitcoin, I think I got my first exposure like early in 2014, like watching like ads and getting tiny payments, and then immediately gambled those away.
So you were watching ads and getting paid in Bitcoin for watching those.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was like basically the faucet times. And then, after that experience, I think I tried to buy Bitcoin on Mt. Gox, and my bank said, "Oh no, that's a scam. You can't just send money to Japan." So they rejected the transaction. I basically gave up on it at that point. And then 2017 rolled around, another number go up opportunity, and that's when I first made the plunge and bought into this thing and tried my best to understand like what it was that I purchased, especially as the price started going down.
And what was it that kind of motivated you to buy it? Like, what was it about Bitcoin? Did you come in from the technical side, from the monetary side? Like, I'm always curious to hear.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in the Bitcoin space, you have kind of two camps: people that came in for hard money, and people came in because they were into technology, and sometimes those overlap, but a lot of times they're very separate. So,
yeah, I think it was really the number go up in the memes that brought it to my attention, but so many seeds had already been planted at that point. Because I had one job, like after graduating college with an engineering degree, I ended up working in a call center. And that call center handled two things: bankruptcies and class action lawsuits. And the only reason that they were hiring people after the Great Recession was because they handled the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. So it was a clear result of the Great Financial Crisis, similar to Bitcoin.
hey guys, just a brief interruption. We'll get back to the exciting show here, but I just want to really ask a favor that you guys could make sure that you're subscribed if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are listening to this on a podcast, please take a second and review this. You don't even have to write a lengthy review or anything at all. Just click the number of stars that you want to give us. It really helps us in the algorithms to make sure people are finding out about what's happening here. All right, back to the show.
And the cases that they put me on were ones where the banks were taking advantage of people in rough situations. So basically, the first case that they put me on was where the bank would reorganize debit card transactions to maximize the overdraft fees that they could charge.
Wait, what?
That and I was like appalled when I saw it.
So they would have like a big transaction, maybe some small ones, but they would put the big one in first, so they had multiple small ones.
Exactly.
That wow,
Within that processing time,
wow,
they could play whatever games they wanted to play, and it wasn't illegal.
really? So they could just say like, if it just went through in the order that the transactions were actually made, it would have had one that was overdraft. But if they reorganized it, they could have four that were
$30 a piece.
wow.
Yeah. And so I was talking to the people that were calling about their settlement check because they knew that they were part of this class action lawsuit and they were hoping to get paid back from it. So after that experience, I was looking for an alternative. Like, why don't they change banks?
Yeah.
And I realized, or I learned that literally all of them did that. There was no like consumer friendly bank out there.
That's crazy. I mean, I know the banks are the banks, but I never would have thought that they would do something like that sinister. I mean, that's
Yeah, and so like, shortly after that, it was like, Wells Fargo creating bank accounts
I
that
remember
didn't
that
exist.
just for just to meet their quotas, they just were creating phantom
So
accounts.
yeah, so I was like to kind of like dox myself politically a bit. Like I came to Bitcoin from the political left. It was like very anti-corporate in my mind because I had seen these things happen, and you know I was hoping for change from that. I saw all the Occupy Wall Street stuff, and I was looking for something different. And then Bitcoin, once I started to understand it, once I started to do the homework as the Bitcoin price was crashing down, and I was trying to figure out whether I should sell it, I realized that it was the alternative to that system, and it gave me hope, and it also piqued my curiosity on the technical side, and that really resonated with me.
So you had an engineering degree, but then you wound up working in a call center. I'm assuming just because the job market was bad. I'm guessing that wasn't your dream job.
Yeah.
And then obviously that kind of spurred what we're talking about as far as Bitcoin. And then how did you jump from there to actually jumping into working on the Lightning Network?
Well, after I got so excited about Bitcoin, then I tried to use Bitcoin and actually spend it. So I think the only, like one of the retailers that was available was overstock.com.
I remember that.
And I, tried, I was going to buy gifts, for my family. And I think I was going to make a $60 transaction. But the mempool was so congested at that point. So many transactions were.
What year was that?
This was, I believe this was 2017.
Okay.
It was like right before Christmas, and the transaction fee was about $60. And then Overstock had a 15-minute window for your transaction to confirm. Well,
So if you weren't in like the next block,
so yeah, and then even if I was, I had no guarantee that it would actually go through.
yeah.
Well, it didn't arrive in time. So they refunded my money, and I had to go do it again. It was by far the worst experience. And so at that point, I just, had a bug in my bonnet about like, I need to find a way for Bitcoin to scale so that I don't have to pay transaction fees. And I heard about this thing called the Lightning Network because Andreas Antonopoulos was talking about it. And like, that's what I want to work on. And Lightning,
2017, that was very early for Lightning.
It's very early. I think the white paper was out at that point, and it really kicked off 2018. And so, like, the first things that you could do with Lightning were feed chickens. Pollo feed was the hot thing, which was basically just a live stream of chickens, and if you paid a micropayment, food dropped for the chickens, and you got to see them run
Scurry
over and
over. Yeah.
scurry over and just eat up all the feed. Um, so yeah, I was showing everybody. I just thought it was the coolest thing that I'm having a real life economic interaction with someone that's in another part of the world, just in real time.
I wonder how much Bitcoin they received on that site, because I've heard that story from other people that was like one of the first things they love spending their Bitcoin on.
Yeah, let's see, not enough. um, yeah, I hope it's lots.
Yeah.
And now we've seen like a whole bunch of kind of copycats. I think you can like feed goats and sheep today, but now you can do a whole lot more where exchanges are integrating it. We're seeing banks look towards that, like Banco Santander. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit on the Lightning Network front.
Well, I know when we started Bitcoin Beach, we were doing everything on chain, um, and at that time the fees were pretty low.
Yeah.
The mempool was kind of empty, and then we had, I can't remember why, I don't know if it was run up in price or whatever, but then the fees started escalating, and I was like, oh, this isn't going to work. People aren't going to make buy a Coke when they got to pay $2 uh, in mining fees to make it to confirm it. And so then we started like telling them like, well, why don't you batch it? You just kind of like you run up a tab with the business and then pay it off at the end of the month. And that was kind of a stopgap. But then I kept doing research, and that's when people talking about Lightning, but everybody kept saying it's 18 months out. It's 18 months out. And we just tried a couple wallets. I'm like, I don't know. It seems to work now. Everybody says it's 18 months out, but this is working. And so that kind of saved us at that point. It was late 2019 that we kind of moved everything over to Lightning.
Yeah, I think well, as we were saying before, after the Bitcoin law passed in El Salvador, that's when I think there was just this groundswell of how do I make payments work?
Yeah.
At low cost, very quickly, for commerce, especially if
Because that was the
people.
only way it was going to work, like, is if Lightning worked.
Yeah, and the law at the time was that like you had to accept it. So how are we going to make this thing work? I mean, like, what an amazing opportunity that we have for Bitcoin to be legal tender, but how is it going to scale to actually do right by the people? And so I think Lightning was the only thing at that time that would be able to help scale Bitcoin in a meaningful way. So that's let's see, it's what got me excited about Lightning, and it's what keeps me working on it.
So is that when you decided to form the company, or what was the timeline for that?
Yeah, so I got connected with the developer behind ThunderHub, which is it's the open source software that runs on most Lightning nodes, and that allows you to do all the channel management and all the tasks that you hear about people that run Lightning nodes work on. And so that was the UI. So like I was in the support chat and asking Tony questions, and he saw me helping other people out in the chat. So eventually he reached out to me to say like, hey, do you want to team up? You ever thought about starting a company? And it had never occurred to me that it was something that you could do. You could just start a company and do something. So we started chatting, and this was like late 2020, and so there wasn't a whole lot of things that we could like go out and do. So I was focused on playing with my Lightning node as my hobby. Uh, but then Tony really pushed me to take it to the next step, and so we teamed up to form Amboss. Thankfully, my brother studied startup law, and so he was able to help us do the initial docs. And After that, after we like actually launched the Explorer, I think there was only one other Explorer out there that people used, and we were both frustrated with the user experience. So we wanted to make
So
something a little bit better. Yeah.
explain for the audience, but for me
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
What is an Explorer when you say the Explorer? What?
Yeah. So Lightning is all about connections. It's not just I hold my Bitcoin, but I'm holding it along with someone else. But it matters who. Like who do I want to partner with to create what I like to think of as a joint account?
And so you're talking about opening a channel.
Opening a channel.
Yeah. Okay.
A channel is a 2 of 2 multi-sig account. So basically a joint account, but you don't have to trust the other person because you've got signatures on either end. So I've got cryptography to rely on to say, I don't need to trust you, but we can share a tab basically between us. So it's a whole network, and all these connections work together. So there's a question of, well, how do I want to allocate my Bitcoin? How do I want to split it up into all these new relationships that I have? And so you need an explorer to do a little bit of research. Who do I want to connect to? What can I find out about them? Are they going to be good for me or bad for me? And answer some of those questions. And also, how do I get in contact with them if anything goes wrong? So those are the main questions, and we wanted to build something that helped out Lightning. So overall, you want to be thinking about who you want to connect to on the Lightning Network, and so we started Amboss.space, which is a Lightning Network explorer to help you easily find information about other nodes on the network, other node runners, and be able to easily connect with them. So the whole Amboss.space Lightning Network Explorer really functions like a directory of all the public nodes on the Lightning Network.
Okay. So I know you brought some graphs and some charts, and are we ready to dive into those, or you tell me where you want to take this?
Sure. So like kind of going off of the idea of a channel, um, let's see. We started off with talking about Poyo feed and making small payments.
Yeah.
But Lightning has a challenge when it comes to scaling up to larger payments.
Because historically, you could only, whatever the smallest channel that you went through in the route, like that was the limiting factor.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, if you were to, drive a truck with a tall load, you need to be thinking about where the low overpasses are. And you need to actually create detours to go around those limitations in the network. So, a tall truck is just like a large payment. So Lightning has that same challenge, and for Lightning, the design decision that was made was to not introduce debt, that thing that caused bankruptcies and caused them to spread. The design was chosen to make a completely debt-free payment system, and that introduces this challenge that's often called liquidity. So basically, you need to be able to, take those completely open roads and be able to route a payment through. So large payments are a challenge. So how do you?
So when payments fail, when you're making a Lightning payment and it just fails, that means it took the wrong route and wound up at one of these and couldn't go through.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are many attempts that are generally made in every Lightning payment. But every attempt that you make, it takes additional time, and time is money. So, and it also, contributes to a poor user experience.
Yeah.
So, a lot of our work, especially recently, has been on, well, how do I improve that, and how do I come up with a metric that I can continuously work to improve,
as far as how to route it most efficiently.
Yeah, and also not only how to route it, which is taking just assuming that the network is static, but how do I change the network
Yeah.
itself so that it can handle larger things?
And
So
where do it's my understanding that more recently that the payments can split and they can go through multi-channels and then come back together
yeah,
at the end. Was that because of some change that was made, or
uh,
was that
yeah, like the protocol is not it's not limited by consensus. So, for Bitcoin, it's very slow to change. But
yeah.
Lightning is very quick to change. So, credit to the folks at Lightning Labs to like push forward atomic multipath payments, as well as the folks that are working on Core Lightning that continually work on updating the protocol and getting folks to agree on specs.
Okay.
So, multipath payments help a lot, uh, but it's not a panacea. You still have to have the right amount of Bitcoin to actually settle the payments. You need to have the appropriate amount of liquidity.
So I'm just curious for you when you're sending a payment, what's kind of your threshold of like whether you would send Lightning versus on chain, and where was that threshold like a year ago, and how has that changed?
That's where I can point to the chart.
Okay.
So
Is this the right chart? Do we have the right chart?
this is the right chart.
Okay.
So each of these blue lines are it's a node on the network, and based on the channels that they have, what payments are possible and which ones are likely to fail or which ones are likely to succeed. So you can see some fall below the network average and some are far above the network average. So a $10 payment has almost 100% reliability to basically go anywhere in the network. But as soon as you start moving towards $100 payments, that reliability drops pretty significantly. And then when you're talking about $1,000 payments, it's kind of a toss up. And this was
And I'm
October.
curious, is this, and is it like as the Bitcoin price changes, does the dollar amount stay the same? So is it more Sats based or is it more dollar based as far as
So
you understand the question, right? Yeah.
I do, yeah. The infrastructure for payments is static in Bitcoin terms.
Yeah.
But the unit of account that we use is dollars for the most part. So, like, as this infrastructure in Bitcoin remains static in dollar terms, it's like the pipes just got bigger. So you can actually send larger payments. I actually have a chart about the changes as the Bitcoin price increases. You can actually see the reliability of these payments, these $10 payments or $100 payments increase.
Okay.
And so we did this in October, kind of saying, what would be crazy is if the Bitcoin price hit $100,000, how would the Lightning Network change without even any infrastructure changes?
Yeah.
And what we saw was, $100 payments, they shot up to 70% reliability from around 50%.
Okay.
So we got a 20% gain in the performance of the Lightning Network without any changes. And the Lightning Network has not been growing. People have been so focused on the capacity of the Lightning Network and how it's basically flat, but they're not accounting for the asset price increasing, that this became a more capable network even without network changes. Now, with network changes, I think we can unlock a whole lot more. And now we have a metric to show for it, to actually measure our progress.
So going back to my original question for you, what would be your threshold of if you're going to choose Lightning or on chain, and what would it have been a year ago?
Yeah, I think I use Lightning for most things. Those are my daily payments. If I had an opportunity to pay rent, I would probably do that on chain. But we'll see. Because I'm basically a Lightning maxi.
Yeah.
I always like to use the tech. Um,
And do you think that will continue to improve?
yeah, yeah. I'm bullish on the price. I'm also bullish on the network and the things that we're doing to help the network improve.
And why do you feel like that the network capacity has been static? Do you just think like it's kind of optimized like for the economics of it? The people don't want to lock up more Bitcoin in it, and so it's kind of at that optimal level right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you the conclusion and then I'll show you the data. Conclusion is that operators on the network are focusing their Bitcoin into larger channels. Um, they're making fewer connections, but they're reallocating it to focus it for their purposes. So it's actually really healthy. We see a couple of indicators for that: the number of channels going down and the average size of the channels going up.
And that's better
That's
because
better.
then you don't have these small channels where things are getting hung up.
Yeah, it's capable of doing larger payments, and also there's just a lot of pruning.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people spun up a Lightning node in the excitement of PlebNet and running on Raspberry Pis, and it's just not, enterprise grade infrastructure. And so a lot of those connections, have been severed to refocus their Bitcoin where it matters.
Interesting. So what specifically are you guys doing in the space, and how, like, what service do you provide? What value add? What is it that you spend your time on?
Yeah. So, uh, one, we've got a marketplace. So if you want to improve how your node performs, you can actually purchase channels from other node operators. So basically, you build new connections that help the network overall be
So
better
rather
connected.
than putting your Bitcoin in to establish to open new channels, you're basically just renting channels from.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
basically like doing a lease, but your partner who you're purchasing from, they maintain their ownership of the Bitcoin. There's not an exchange of Bitcoin
Yeah.
per se, so you're purchasing a channel and it's a lease. Um, now, what?
And who would do that? What would be the reason to do that?
So for a merchant that is receiving payments, they could do the math and say, okay, do I want to get signed up with Visa and pay 3% or more per transaction to do payment processing? Or do I want to use the Lightning Network and lease channels and pay 0.3%?
Okay,
Now,
that makes sense.
on the other side of that trade, they're getting yield on their Bitcoin without giving up custody. So I take my Bitcoin, I've got a node, I'll create a new channel, I'm getting paid for it, but I need Bitcoin in order to do that.
Yeah.
And it costs me an on-chain transaction to start up that relationship and another on-chain transaction in the future if I ever decide to close it. But I'm getting paid either way.
Now, would you classify that as risk-free yield, or is there still some technical risk or some other risk that comes into play where
Yeah,
you could lose your Bitcoin?
there is still risk, but on the spectrum of risk in risky investments, you're still holding Bitcoin and you're holding Bitcoin in self custody.
And so, what is the risk?
So the risk is hot wallet risk. You have an internet connected device that has your Bitcoin. That's one. You've got protocol risk. So this is the Lightning Network protocol. There's some bug in it. Now, as Bitcoiners, we carry that type of risk all the time. That there's a bug in the Bitcoin protocol. This thing is continually being tested.
Yeah.
And so we've worked a lot of those pieces out. The risk doesn't go away, but we live with it. As opposed to any of the financial system where they got tons of leverage and loans, there's way more risk there. So one thing that Lightning doesn't have is counterparty risk. So I don't have to worry about your failure to payment or you declaring bankruptcy because I already have your signature.
So you can just
that
force
gives
close
me,
the channel at any
yeah,
time if need be.
yeah. So I get my Bitcoin back, but that's basically the risk. Force close is a type of risk. So we've been recently working on research that helps predict forced closes. And based on our research, it's showing that we can actually predict that based on the structure of the network. If we see a couple of forced closes in certain places, we can actually predict with a decent amount of certainty that this will happen within the next period of time. So we've got research going on that front to reduce that risk so that we can work towards enterprise adoption of Lightning. The other thing that we work on is, well, how do we, since this gives people yield on their Bitcoin without giving up custody, a fundamental change from BlockFi or Celsius, how do we bring that financial opportunity to an enterprise market? So basically, how do we scale this thing up to, give people a very low risk way to get more Bitcoin by leveraging what they already have and creating payment infrastructure? Because the yield doesn't come from nothing; it comes from actual payment processing, which anyone can now access instead of just Visa or MasterCard.
So, a couple questions. One, how do you do that? How technical does somebody have to be in order to be able to use their Bitcoin to generate this yield? And second question, like, is this something that you would put your personal stack into, or you would say like, no, I would still only put a percentage in because there's still some risk, and so.
Yeah, I think there's like a fair amount of like portfolio allocation that you can do, but right now, today, it's really difficult. Um, I think you might be bored to tears on actually setting this thing up.
Yes, yes.
We want to bring that down to zero or make it as easy as making an on-chain Bitcoin transaction.
But still allowing people to have full self custody. They're not relying on you guys as a trusted third party that could rug them.
Yeah, that's right. So we want full self custody. That's where we want to get to.
Yeah.
We'll have trade-offs that we'll have to make along the way in order to get people access to this novel market. But that's where we want to go, because if we get people to do that, that means that larger and larger payments are possible on Bitcoin infrastructure. And I want to move global financial flows into the Lightning Network. And I think we can do it.
So what are the biggest products for you guys, and where do you see how do you see that changing going forward, and how does what's happened in El Salvador like play into that? Like, is it giving you guys a roadmap of when other countries start to adopt, of what you think you'll see? Do you think it's going to be mostly people using custodial products, and so they're not really making Lightning transactions a lot of times, and they're all using the same wallet? Or do you see that it being a variety of wallets, so it is true Lightning? Asked a lot of questions at once, but
yeah, like on the consumer side, I think people do use custodial solutions a lot. We made a lot of effort to give people self custody Lightning, or at least Lightning compatibility. So we created BancoLibre.com, and so we made that to be the easiest wallet for people to get a Lightning address so that they can receive into self custody. So it's just an email and a password sign up. Basically, what we did was we took a password manager, Bitwarden, and forked it to work for Bitcoin seed phrases.
Interesting.
So it's usable today. It's free to use, and it gives people the ability to be compatible with Lightning. So on the consumer side, I think people will use lots of different wallets, but what's important is that they're all interoperable. So I can get paid from Strike and pay with Wallet of Satoshi, Phoenix, what have you, Banco Libre, any of the options. It all works together. But when you go to businesses, then it's a completely different ballgame, because a lot of the things that they have to do are, motivated by regulation. They're going to have to do accounting, like that's part of their compliance stuff. they also have to comply with any of the laws, any of the financial restrictions that countries implement. One of the biggest ones is the United States, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. This is the biggest no-no list. It's all the terrorists and money launderers, and it lists specifically Bitcoin addresses on there, as well as ETH addresses, what have you. And how is a business
So
supposed to?
it lists specific Bitcoin addresses.
Yeah.
So once people know they're on the OFAC list, why wouldn't they just move their Bitcoin to a different address?
Oh, why wouldn't they?
I mean, that seems silly.
Now, like anyone that receives that Bitcoin, there is like traceability on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah.
So you know where it came from.
But if that address, if they just set up a new wallet and move it to a new address, it's not on the OFAC list, then people aren't prohibited from accepting it, correct?
Well, like, what's your risk profile, basically? How many steps removed do you want to be from a terrorist when you're speaking with Elizabeth Warren, that wants to shut you down as a business? So like, what's your risk tolerance? Now, like for cash, for dollars, by law, it's fungible. Now, like, even like,
yeah, it could come directly from a drug dealer to the bank to you. Then there's no impact.
It's all the same. But suddenly for Bitcoin, where you've got a historical record right there, which great feature for auditability.
But horrible for privacy.
It's rough for fungibility, for privacy.
I heard a story of somebody here that was doing a large transaction for real estate and had bought Bitcoin from a like regulated exchange in Canada.
Yeah.
But the person that they were sending it to, the whatever the company they were using to receive it, wouldn't allow it to be received because before it came into the exchange, it came from a gambling website, also legal, but just because it was linked to a gambling website, before it went to the exchange, they wouldn't. It was like, if we're really going to go down this path, we're going to wind up with two classes of Bitcoin.
Mike, I didn't know you were associated with poker players.
This was not me, but it was it was but it was crazy for me to hear that story.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I felt bad for this person because they were trying to make a purchase here and they were like held up, and I was like, that's insane. Like, I mean, that would make me, especially if I was new to Bitcoin, it would make me be like, oh, I don't want to use this. Like, it's not fungible.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it makes for a horrible like customer experience. But that is like the law of the land, and as
that's the reality that businesses face.
Yeah, you can't go around breaking the law. One, you won't get investment, and no one wants to work with you if you're bad for their brand. So basically, there's similar issues when it comes to Lightning, because Lightning does have privacy features. So how is a business supposed to protect themselves so that they, don't get bad press? And they will be able to answer Elizabeth Warren's, interrogation. We'll be able to answer those with the right answers. Do you have a policy in place? Do you have like the product that actually implements that policy? Do you like continuously monitor for money laundering and terrorism? And they need to answer yes. So we built a product for those businesses so that they can answer those questions in the right way. And that's not at all to advocate for those laws.
Yeah.
I would wish that they go away. However, they're still there, and businesses have obligations under those jurisdictions.
So a little bit off topic, but it's come up a couple times, and people I've been chatting with. Just curious as your take. There's talk that stablecoins over Lightning will be the next big thing. How will those stablecoin issuers deal with the fact that Lightning is not traceable in the way that on-chain transactions are?
It's a big challenge. Um, One of the things that we learned was that OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, they require that businesses outside of the US know the origin and the destination of funds. That's super easy to do when it comes to the Bitcoin blockchain because, well, it came from that address and now it's at this
Yeah.
address. So you got clear origin and destination. In Lightning, you don't have that. Uh, you know that the money arrived at your place. You don't know where it came from. Like you know where it went to. Um, so that's a real challenge, and I think that the laws will have to update for that. Um, and if they don't, it's it's not a good thing for Lightning privacy. Um, and I think we want to have privacy. Um, the thing that gives me pause is
So when you
when
say it's
yeah
not a good thing for Lightning privacy or just for Lightning, would it, because is there a way that they could adjust it so that that happens, which obviously we don't want to see.
yeah like not really.
Yeah,
Um,
so it would basically just make using Lightning payments illegal.
yeah, and that would be a horrible situation.
Yeah,
We need like not only do we need Bitcoin to scale, but we need to be prepared for the future. We need to be prepared for a machine economy where we're transacting with AIs at high volumes, and that's not possible with the traditional financial system, nor is it possible with on-chain Bitcoin. So
yeah,
you need Lightning, and businesses need to adopt that in order to be ready for the future. So basically that where that leaves us is um, we need to find a way for businesses to be able to comfortably use Lightning to be prepared for the future. Um, and well, like it's basically you would have to know the exact route that a payment had taken from origin to destination. Otherwise, you can't transact, and it's not a good situation. Nobody wants to have to build that, nor comply with that.
yeah. Well, I'm just curious where you think Lightning is going. Like, where do you see the focus of your guys' company? What do you see that's exciting that's happening? Um, and then we'll try to wrap things up. This is probably this is definitely on the very technical side for what we usually cover. So we won't make this an hour and a half long one. But yeah, just wanting to know what you see as kind of promising in the space.
Stablecoins on Lightning is huge. I think a lot of Bitcoiners are not paying close attention to that, but it's going to be massive. Just for some context, Tether did $7 trillion in transactions this past year. That's more than Visa. So stablecoins clearly have product market fit, and the blockchains that they've been using are not secure. I mean, they're too small to be secure, and they're at one phone call risk where they
Yeah,
could be shut down. They're too centralized. Where we need a fully decentralized system in order to make stablecoins work, and so that should happen on Bitcoin. Um, so a big motivator for us is like I need to build bigger pipes on the Lightning Network to actually move all the global transactions onto Bitcoin, um, and create those additional demands for Bitcoin, as well as new opportunities for yield on the Bitcoin network.
awesome. So what are you doing in El Salvador?
I'm going to Plan B and also taking advantage of our team that is here and opportunities to work together.
And do you see like what's happening in El Salvador? Does that impact your guys' business at all, or is it just curious as to what businesses kind of from the outside looking in?
We've seen several businesses move to El Salvador, and it's something that I'd love to learn quite a bit more about because they're doing it for a reason. It's not, I mean, they got all the countries on the earth, but something's happening in El Salvador, and you can sense it. Um, I see that people have a lot of hope here, and uh, yeah, it's notable. And also, it's like a place where you can actually make purchases in Bitcoin. So I love to see like on the ground usage of Bitcoin on day-to-day transactions.
Yeah, it's amazing how many Bitcoiners El Salvador's been the first time they've actually made a Lightning transaction. Like even some very notable Bitcoiners in the space that have been way longer than me, have come down. They're like, "Well, I've never actually made a Lightning transaction before." I'm like, "Come on, you've got to." So it's definitely one of those things that you see it, the future kind of here, like in everyday life. I always joke with my wife. She's like, "I'm not a Bitcoiner." I'm like, "You've made more Bitcoin transactions than 99.9% of the people at the Bitcoin conference, in Nashville or something like that," because she just uses it every day in her daily life. And so, and that's possible here in El Salvador where it wouldn't be anywhere else.
You don't even have to call yourself a Bitcoiner, and you're still making more Bitcoin transactions.
Exactly. And that's the direction that Bitcoin needs to go to be truly usable for people who don't consider themselves Bitcoiners to be using it on a daily basis.
Ideally, people don't even know what Bitcoin is, what Lightning is. They're just using it.
Well, where can people follow you? Where can they find out more information about your guys' company? Anything else you want to put out there before we finish up?
Yeah, you can find out more about the company at amboss.tech, AMBOSS. And you can follow us on Twitter. We're on Nostr as well, Amboss Tech. And I'm on Twitter or X as Jestifer_BTC.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming in today and your patience, my lack of technical chops. So
it was an absolute pleasure, Mike.
It was
Thanks
great.
so much.